Now it's time to get into some technique. Now this first painting we're going to do here is really, whether you're a beginner or advanced person, if you've never painted with acrylics, what we're going to do today is just almost entirely technique. So we're going to do a very simple landscape that will just give you the idea on how to work your acrylics. Now as our lessons progress and you get more advanced and more confident, then you can get into some of the more advanced things. But let's start off first of all with a very quick loose sketch, and we'll start with our charcoal. Now this is a very soft charcoal. It's a vine charcoal, real thin round piece of charcoal, and that's all we need to sketch with. So you need to keep that in your painting kit and ready to go. You need some paper towels, you need a can of water, and of course your squirt bottle to keep things moist. Alright, so let's kind of start off here with a simple painting, and we'll do a simple mountain first in the background. Now I live way up in the mountains, and I like to paint mountains, so I always use those as a study. And we'll have some grass here, some rocks. We may have some water in here, just to kind of show you what you can do with water. We'll have a few trees and some different various things so you can learn how to use all these items. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is paint our sky. Alright, now to introduce you to acrylics properly, you need to understand how we get the effect that we get for certain paintings. Now we move down to our palette, and we're going to start with our big sky brush. Well, I call this the sky brush. I will wet it, and then I will take my finger and squeegee the excess water out so that it's flat. Then we take our gesso and we pour some gesso right in the middle of our palette. Now just pour out enough to get a nice coating of gesso on the sky. Anytime you're painting a sky or large bodies of water, you always put gesso on the sky first. While it's still wet, then you add your colors and it blends beautifully. Alright? Now, first thing you do is take your brush that's got water on it and you paint your sky with just water. Okay? Now for those of you that are real picky about whether your water is dirty or clean, we may have a little clash here because I paint with dirty water. I never clean it out unless it gets real thick. Then we change it. But don't worry about dirty water. It will have no effect whatsoever on your painting, okay? And besides that, with acrylic painting, you need to learn to work fairly quick. The only thing you do is rinse your brush out, lay them down, and keep them wet, and they'll stay good all day long also. You don't have to be cleaning them every few minutes. After you've wet the canvas, then you wet your brush again, just squeegee the excess water out, go down to your gesso, put a generous layer of gesso in your brush, just work it right in, come up to the top, and here's the secret to acrylic painting. This is really the true secret to acrylic painting, especially in blending, is the gesso underneath first. Now you put it on fairly thick, and the way you know if it's thick enough is you run your finger across, look at it, and if it's a good solid white on your finger, then you know you've got plenty of gesso. Okay? Now you use big X's. See the big crisscross motion? Now by the way, if these brushes are shedding, don't panic. That's fairly normal for a brush. Now if it loses all of its bristles, then you've got a problem. But if you're having a few that come out, if it's a fairly new brush, that's normal, so don't worry about that. And if you're having a struggle finding these brushes, don't hesitate to give us a call on our 800 number and we can send one to you, because we keep them in stock here because sometimes they are kind of hard to find. Alright, now notice we've got the canvas covered. Okay, now while it's still wet, by the way, I want to remind you here, if you haven't heard before, I have a little saying here. It's called the 3 Ps. Don't piddle, play, or putter. And that's very important for you, especially if you're brand new at this. Don't piddle with this, trying to pick out all the little hairs and fix every little problem, because you'll end up with a dry sky that won't blend. All right, now, don't clean your brush. You go immediately down to the red on one corner, yellow on the other corner, put a strip of color across, and see, we've gone right over the mountain. Don't worry about it. You use the same X's, the big crisscross motion. Like so. Until you blended this about halfway up or most of the way up using a very light feathery stroke. like so. Okay? Now after you've done that, now see how soft and beautiful that is? Don't clean your brush, but you go immediately down to your blue, dip it in one corner, take your purple and a little touch of purple, not quite as much, and you put a strip of that up here, and you blend this color into this color using the same X's. Go right on across, because we want this side to be a little lighter in color over here, so you don't have to add a lot of color. Just take what's left and just blend it on across. Now, after you've got the color on, very quickly just rinse the excess out of your brush. Don't try to clean it, and then squeegee it out, get all that water out of there. And then you come back to blend. It's pretty handy to keep a paper towel ready so you can kind of dab this off. Now all you do is you take these colors and blend them together. Notice the big X's. That softens it, gives it a lot of interest. I'm just barely touching the surface of the canvas. Now, if your canvas is beginning to dry up, and a lot of it has to do with what part of the country you're living in. If you're living where there's a lot of humidity, sometimes it doesn't dry as quickly, or if you're in an air-conditioned room where it's being dehumidified, sometimes it dries a little quicker. Just depends. If you do have a problem with it drying, and it's still not too wet or too dry, you can mist it lightly, just like that, and then you can work it, see? But if you let it set for too long, it'll leave little white spots that you can't blend out. So that's sort of an experiment. You'll just have to experiment and see. Acrylic painting is an experimental thing in the beginning. I can teach you a lot, but you're going to have to experiment to learn a lot also. Okay? Now, we've blended it. Next thing is we're going to work on our water. Anytime you're doing a painting with water in it, always work the sky and the water at the same time, or right after each other, because your water always picks up the colors that are in your sky. Now, same thing applies here. Rinse your brush, just get the basic paint out of there. Lightly wet the area where the water is. Now notice I've got real dirty water, and it just barely shows up on the canvas as dirty, but that's okay, it doesn't matter. I'll re-emphasize the area where the water is. There's a line right here and a little hill that comes down here. This area that's left right here is water, okay? So you wet it with water. Then you come down to your gesso, put a generous coating of gesso on, just like we did before. And don't be afraid to go way above your normal sketch. In other words, the sketch that you put on there, paint right over it. That way you're covered for sure. Okay, got a nice generous coating of gesso. Now, you same thing you did in the sky. Take a little red or yellow on one corner, touch of red on the other, come across the water using big X's, a little more red. Now the color doesn't have to be an exact match, but you want a similar value. Okay, come down a ways, rinse your brush out, or just add some water to it. Then you come down and add a little blue and a touch of purple. Start at the bottom and work your way up. Add a little more blue. Okay. Now this is the underpainting for the water. There'll be reflections and ripples and who knows what all is going to be in here. But this is the basic color you start with. Big X's to blend. I suggest you just get a blank canvas and do nothing but practice blending, okay? Just blend. That's all you have to do. Okay? Now, you've got your water blended and your sky blended, and while those are beginning to dry, now you can lay this brush down. Just wet it, lay it down on your palette, and that's all you have to do. Now, this is my first time, and you'll get in the habit, so I'm going to keep impressing on you that every so often you need to wet your brushes and your paints and your gesso and everything. Just occasionally do that. Now, I may be wetting it a little more often in here because we're working under extremely hot lights and things dry a little faster. Now, the next thing we're going to do is block in our mountain. Now, simply because we're trying to learn basics today, I'm not going to make the mountain real complicated, but it is something that's very interesting, and it's simple to do. So down here on your palette, we're going to switch to our number 6 bristle brush. And in the same mixture, the same gesso that you have here, depending on how much you have. Now, if you have a whole lot of it, you might scoop some of it away. You just want enough for 3 or 4 real good brushfuls of paint. Now, I already had some mud in my brush, a little brown, and so I'm mixing it in there, which is okay, as we're going to add that color anyway. Now, to this gesso down here, you take ultramarine blue, a pretty good blob of it, as you can see, a little blob of purple, and a little blob of burnt sienna. Mix it all together till you get a pretty sort of a bluish gray kind of, it's got a little purple tint to it. You need to work it in and blend it good so that you have a solid color there, because that's what you're going to block your mountain in with. Now notice my brush has got plenty in it, okay? Now if you don't have your mountain, or if you're worried that you won't find it again, well, you can go ahead and resketch it with the charcoal, because the charcoal will dust right off of your canvas. That's why we use it, okay? Now, take the blue, or this grayish color, and paint this mountain in very loose, and quick, and free. Don't worry about how pretty it is. Just get a good shape up there. Block it in carefully but quickly. Don't worry about any rough edges. Give it a nice shape. It takes about 3, maybe 4 brushfuls of paint to get this where it needs to be. Okay? Now then, in a minute I'm going to show you how to put the highlights on that mountain to make it stand out, okay, to make it really effective. We are going to have one more layer of mountains coming forward, so the next step is knowing how to do that. How do you get the next layer? Well, that's called the value system. Everything that comes forward will get darker and more intense in color, a little more detailed. The next mountain, or just a small little ridge here, is going to be darker. So down here on your palette, in the same mixture, take burnt sienna, blue, a little purple, and get a much darker color. Burnt sienna, blue, and purple. See what we can come up with here. Now this should be darker, okay? Now while the background's still wet, you just block this in here all the way across and just build some little ridges here and there. You don't have to get any major mountain in here. Just kind of blend it into the bottom of the mountain, okay? Doesn't matter. Now you might want to make one peak a little bit more dominant there. Okay, something kind of like that. So now you have 2 layers. You've got this layer, and that creates a little distance in the painting. Okay, now while this is drying, we're going to move up to this part of the mountain and we're going to start putting the highlights on it to make it look three-dimensional. So rinse your brush out. And I'm rinsing it really good this time because we're going to use a lighter color. So anytime you're switching from one color to the other, especially if you want it to be brighter, clean the mud out. Rinse it. Dry it off. Now we come down to our palette and we mix the sunshine color. Now the question has come up many times, why don't you use a palette knife to mix? Well, usually when you use a palette knife to mix with, you're usually mixing up piles of paint, or usually mix up more than you need. And all we need is just a little touch here and there to do something with this acrylic. So down here, you will take just a little white, a little touch of yellow, to get sort of a soft light color. Maybe a little more yellow, maybe a touch of red. And then you take a paper towel and you dry the excess out of your brush because you just want enough to make the mountain come alive, okay? Now, take your brush, start at the top, and it's going to come with skill and practice. Now, I know a lot of you get flustered when you're watching me paint or some other artist paint, and you think you can do that, and you get up there and you make a big mess of it. Definitely is much easier said than done, but that's why you need to practice. So, start here at the top, and let's start developing some highlights in the mountain where maybe the sun's hitting it and it begins to look three-dimensional. And this is what's really exciting to me. Taking just an old blob of blue or gray up here and turning it into something that really is effective. See, I'm just building little soft images, and if you run out of paint, just take a little touch of red, white and yellow and red. Build your color back again. Okay. Now, you may in some cases want brighter areas of the mountain to stand out because the sun may be hitting something that's protruding forward. You know, that's fine. You can just do that by adding paint on a little thicker. Now, isn't that exciting how you can just turn a blob of color into something just really beautiful? This is really the real joy in painting, is making it work. Now, like I said before, we're just learning some basics here. You're not going to take this mountain and turn it into a major mountain or anything that requires a lot of effort. This is just purely, simply the basics of highlighting, how to shape things, how to put form on here, and that gives you a distant mountain to look at. Now, this little mountain in the foreground here, you can use the same color, but you may want to make it a little stronger just by adding a little more yellow or a little bit more red. It's just a little ridge up here in front that doesn't really require a whole lot of detail. Just a little highlight here and there. It kind of flattens out. This doesn't have a whole lot of detail to it because we're going to have lots of trees and so forth and so on. Now, the next step here, while that's drying and before we go back and do any more detail work on it, is to come and start blocking in all of the areas where we're going to have grasses and rocks and things like that. It's called underpainting. By the way, while I'm thinking about it, notice now a lot of these bristles, these hairs, if you just take your finger, sometimes you can just rub them and they come right off. And that's one of the things that makes acrylic painting kind of good, because when it dries, these will come right off. You don't have to worry about destroying something, okay? It takes care of itself. All right? So now we're going to take and switch brushes. So wet this one and lay it down. We will now switch to our number 10 bristle brush. And we are going to block in this area and this area, okay? And the way you'll do that is you come down here to your palette, take a little water, not much now. You take your Hooker's green and your dioxazine purple. Those are the two colors. Hooker's green and dioxazine purple. And I'm going to give you a rule. The rule is if you're ever mixing with green, always mix its complement or a warmer value, which almost always is going to be red of some form. So now you add a little burnt sienna to it or a little red to it. Now I will say this, purple is a form of red because it has red in it, but it's not warm enough and light enough to really do the green justice. So after you get the two dark values mixed, then you add a little red. Okay? Now it's real simple. All we do is scrub like this the underpainting. Now this is another important thing about acrylic painting. You just scrub this like so. And as you go across and as you go up, you scrub this like so. This. Now this is called feathering, where you take a color, blend it into another color, and you feather the two together where there's not a real hard, definite edge. Okay, so that's one thing you need to do. Then we come down to this section. And we do a similar thing. You take the green, and the purple, and a little red or burnt sienna, and you're going to block this in. Mixing your green and your purple and your brown again, or green and purple and red. Okay, now this looks pretty basic, and it is basic, but all paintings, every single one of them, start out this way, okay? Real important. Now you've underpainted and got the whole thing blocked in. Now this is where you will go back and start doing things that make the painting come alive. Now while this is drying, we're going to go back and block in some distant background trees. So you rinse your brush, and we mix up a distant color. Now on my palette you can see here now that things are beginning to dry up a little bit, and so I want to make a little room. So remember what I told you, you wet the areas that are drying up, you take a razor blade, and see it just scrapes right off. There's no effort at all. It just slides right off. I'm going to keep that little bit of blue there because it's still wet and I might want to use it for something. Then you just take a paper towel, wipe the excess, then you're ready to go. Now, down here you take your number 10 brush, take a little bit of white, a little bit of blue, a little bit of green, and a little bit of purple. And you get sort of a gray. It's similar to this gray right here, up on the canvas, the background mountain. Then you come up here and you're going to block in the shape of some distant trees, okay? Really not difficult to do, but a gray color like this is a distant color. Now, it can be a greenish gray, it can be a bluish gray, a purplish gray, as long as it's a gray form. Now, I think it's a little dark. I'm going to add just a little white to it. Anytime you want to change values, if you've never had any experience before, always add white. That's how you change the value of something. Now you start back here in the background by dry brushing a smudge against that light, that dark, so that there's no hard edge, okay? Then you go straight on to your canvas like this, creating the shape of some distant trees. Now we'll highlight these trees a little later, but these are distant trees or bushes or whatever you want to call them. Now I almost got it too light because see the dark shows good against that, but over here it doesn't show up very well. So you may have to darken it just a little bit. Now don't worry about covering up part of your mountains. That's the whole point. That sets them further back. And right along the top of this dark green you put in here, you scrub this gray color, and that's what softens it and makes it become a little bit more, well, you might say distant. A little more distant, no hard edges, softer. Okay, now you can begin to see this thing starting to develop. Now let's move over to the right-hand side of the canvas. Okay. Now I'm going to take my green, this dark color that we mixed with earlier, and I'm going to add a little bit of this light blue. Now if you don't have any of this light blue, you can add a little bit from your light blue violet. That's a similar color. And we want this over here to be a little greener with a little darker color, a little bigger tree. Now notice I'm just blobbing the paint on, but at this point I will begin shaping a tree here. Now I will show you in a minute how to turn this blob of paint into a beautiful tree. But first of all, you got to get some little fuzzy shapes here. Now there's 2 or 3 things that happen as I've traveled around and taught seminars and workshops. We all have a tendency to line things up, and sometimes we make our trees look perfectly round and give them exact shapes. You want to be real careful about that. So you want them to have some nice shapes, and that contrast against these mountains now, as you can see, is beginning to set them back. This is coming forward, and pretty soon the painting starts becoming really beautiful. All right. Now, while these little soft shapes are drying, let's move down to the edge of the water. Okay. Now, building reflections in acrylics is not difficult, but notice this is dry now. And so to accomplish the effect of reflections now, we have to dry brush some color down here in the water. So you take the same color that you just had up here on this tree, and you go down here to your palette, add just a little water, and you lighten that by adding some more blue to it. Okay? And you come along the edge here with your brush turned sideways, and you scrub like this the gray values, and you work real hard into the canvas, softening like so. See how I'm building that down where the canvas is taking on the beads on the canvas is what you use to blend with. It's kind of like being a brush. It's doing some of the work for you. Okay? So now after you get the gray in there, you can see that's beginning to contrast and make the water already begin to look wet. Now that in itself is exciting. But I notice how I'm working very hard to make sure the edge stays very soft. Okay? Now after you've scrubbed in some of the underpainting for the water, then you take the same brush, and now we're going to establish the ground back here. So you go down to your palette, add a little water, don't clean your brush. Take a little white and a touch of yellow, and with the mud that's in your brush, that creates sort of a greenish gray, which is the first color we want to use to start highlighting your background. Okay, you work it into your brush, and you come up here and you go kind of in a, I don't know, sort of a circle, semicircle, and across the background here. But now don't put it on too thick. You want to dry brush it. And you don't leave any hard edge, but notice how I'm scrubbing very lightly, building character and texture and technique here. I'm giving this a lot of softness. Don't want any hard edges anywhere. Right underneath this clump of trees. Now see what this does? This automatically pushes your everything getting further back, and then the things in the foreground are getting closer. Just like so. Now as you get closer to the water, you dry brush this without as much enthusiasm. In other words, just smudge it on and kind of soften that darkness, because the brightest areas are going to be on the top, okay? And we'll come back with final highlights later. But now we need to come back in here and begin to highlight the edge of our trees. So you come down here to your palette, take a little touch of water, and in that same mixture, you add a little more white and a little more yellow. Work it in real good. Feather out your brush. And sometimes if it's a canvas, a stretched canvas, and it bounces, sometimes you need to hold your finger on there to keep the canvas from bouncing. That's okay. Now, starting at the top, you go straight on and you start creating the leaf patterns of the tree. Okay. Like so. Now, every time you put a little light color, you leave a dark value underneath it or behind it, and that makes the tree look three-dimensional. So see, we've got some three-dimensional leaves showing. The tree begins to take on character. Of course, we're going to add the limbs and all that stuff in just a little while. Come right on across. Okay, now see how beautiful that is? You create that soft, fluffy looking tree. It's just absolutely outstanding. Now you can come across to the other side over here, take a little touch of water, add a little more yellow and white, just to get a little different color. Don't try to keep everything the same color or the same value. You've only got a couple of trees here that need some highlighting, and again the same thing. You make sure your brush is full of paint, feather it out, come up here, and this has got a little bit more of a greenish tint to a yellowish green. Okay, and as soon as you get a little bit on this one done, then move over to this one. Okay, now then, we're beginning to put some life into this painting. Now one thing that you can do right now while you have this color on your brush is intensify the highlight on the grasses. So all you have to do on your palette is take a little more yellow and white and continue building the same layer up until it's a little brighter. And just on the tops up here, dry brush a little bit of this yellowish color. And see, that makes it look like the sun is hitting the grass up here. Like so. Okay. Just a little bit over here. And we continue dry brushing. Now, you see how the sunlight's beginning to light up the background? All right. Now, let's get off of that part for just a little while. Let's rinse our brush out, lay it down. Things are drying out a little bit, so I'm going to mist these a little. Brushes, gesso. In fact, I think I'll put the lid on the gesso. We're through with it for now. Now we're going to move down to the bank or the shoreline of the water. Now this is where we'll have some dirt, some sand, maybe some rocks, which are, well, we're going to put some bigger rocks down here, but we'll put a few small ones back here. Let's take your number 6 bristle brush and wet it and then wipe it out a little bit. Then you're going to take some burnt umber with a little purple and throw your green in there, because your green will have to kind of counteract this color we're going to put on here. And if you put just brown and blue on there, or brown and purple, it's going to look funny. So you take your brown and your purple, your burnt umber and your purple, add a little green to it, and all on the edge of the water, right here, we are going to quickly lay in a little more depth to it. In other words, just kind of block in a real dark but very subtle and soft edge. Don't leave a hard line. See, I'm kind of fuzzing it, but you want it broken, uneven, not perfect. Don't get out a ruler and make sure that's straight, because that'll really cause some serious problems for you. See, I always go back and soften. Now, you're going to hear me say that all the time. Go back and soften, go back and soften. But the secret, and I think one of the biggest controversies in acrylic, is they don't get the softness that an oil gets. Well, this technique proves that you can if you understand it. Okay, so now we've got that, and immediately go right to your palette, take a little white, and you work into your brush the white paint with the mud that you have on there from putting on that dark color, and that'll be your highlight color. So take that, come up here, and very quickly, now remember the sun's coming in from the right hand side, but very quickly, let's just make some little smudges of highlight to create the suggestion of rocks. Now this is where a lot of you will begin pulling out your hair, but don't worry about it, because it's everybody's problems, not just yours. Almost everyone I've ever taught or talked to, myself included, has always struggled in the beginning with rocks. Just don't line them all up in a row. Don't give them all the same shape. Don't give them all the same look of any kind. Just be quick about it. See, it's just a quick stroke. A couple of them are bigger, some smaller ones, all kinds of things. Okay, this could be a bigger rock right there, smaller, just little dabs of highlight to create the suggestion of rocks. Then you've got a very interesting shoreline. This is what I call the one-stroke method of painting rocks. And then if you'll notice, underneath each rock, I'm going back and I'm putting a little smudge of highlight to create a little bit of a reflection, okay, just to create a little bit of a reflection. Okay, now then, we are really making progress here on this. This is becoming more exciting all the time. So the next step is to move on over now. And we're going to do a couple of things that'll scare some of you, but that's okay. Fear is part of it. We're going to put a great big tree over here that's going to have a lot of limbs, going to have some bark on it. It's going to be a very, very interesting thing, because something that most of you don't know how to do. So take your brush and rinse it out. And if you feel more confident, go ahead and take a piece of charcoal and sketch in where the tree goes. It'll set right, not exactly on top of this hill, but kind of just below the top of it. And we're going to have a lot of tree limbs. Now the only thing I do not want you to do, and I advise against it, don't sketch this tree to the point that you're going to follow it like a paint by number. Just get the basic location, because if you're not careful, you'll catch yourself filling in the lines, and then your tree looks real funny. Okay? you've got a couple limbs that are going to kind of hang way out into the painting. You're going to have some smaller limbs that kind of come out here, and it's best to sort of ad-lib a tree like this. Just don't do it quickly. Think about it for a minute. Make sure that's what you want before you dive into it. Just get the basics. Okay? Now, take your number 6 bristle brush. This part's real simple. You're not going to have any problems with this at all. Guaranteed. Take pure burnt umber with a little bit of purple, and all you do is come up and block it in very loose and quick. Remember that a tree tapers, gets smaller as it goes up. Okay, it just gets a little bit smaller, a little bit less intense. So the widest part of the tree is the bottom. You can add a little bit of water if you want to. You can get some of the smaller limbs there. I'm going to have one that comes out here. Take it only as far as you feel confident that you can go without making a mess for yourself. And as you go on up, remember, you can add the limbs wherever you feel confident. Go right on off the canvas, lean the tree right on over here. Don't worry about your edges being a little bit rough, because you're going to come back and put bark on there, and barking is a lot of fun. Okay, now as soon as you get the tree limbs on here with this brush, then in a minute we're going to switch to another brush that puts the final limbs on there, then we'll highlight it. But because there'll be lots of limbs that overlap each other and create a lot of interest in this painting. Okay, now you've got that blocked in. It's fairly solid, very dark. And while that's drying, we're going to move on down here and begin working on the foreground here where our rocks go, the bigger rocks. This is where a lot of us finally decide we're ready to make it or break it here, because rocks are difficult. Not these little ones, but the bigger ones. But I got to show you the basics so that you can get started and practice on it. So rinse your brush out. And let's start here by blocking in the dark parts. So take ultramarine blue, take your burnt umber and a little purple, and all you do is come up to your canvas and just start blopping. I don't know what you want to call it, just blocking them in, just blob it on, don't worry about it. Little blobs of paint like that, and I will show you how to turn these blobs into beautiful rocks. Right along the edge here, just kind of block it in kind of dark, because there will be quite a few rocks here. Okay? So we'll just take a few minutes here and let's block in the rocks. Burnt umber and blue. A little purple. Okay, now we're going to finish putting the rest of these rocks here, and then we're going to move right into the highlighting. Okay, now you've got several blobs of color there, dark values, and that's setting up for a minute. We're going to move down and reflect our water. Now notice we put this gray-green here. We're going to do a similar thing here with this green, and the reflection of the tree, and then the reflection of the rocks. So rinse your brush out. And now let's go down here and take just a little bit of, not too much, but take a little green, a little purple, and a touch of blue, maybe some burnt sienna there. Don't get too much brown in there. If you add a little white to it, that'll lighten it some. Okay, and you get sort of a greenish purple color. And just like you did up here on the bottom part of that part of the water, over here you do the similar thing. You turn your brush sideways and go all the way across the water's edge, softening that. Scrubbing it like so until you've got all this softness worked in. Okay, that's how you build the first layer for the reflection. Now, as soon as that's dry, then we'll come and add a couple of ripples or something in the water here shortly. But now we're going to come back up here and work on the rocks. Well, you can take that same brush with the same color, touch of water maybe, come down here and pick up a little white with a touch of red and a touch of yellow, and that'll be our sunshine color. Now, you can't really see every individual blob of color or darkness on there, so you have to kind of design the rocks as you go. Now over here we got a lot of smaller ones we can start with, and remember the sun's coming in from the right, just a quick swish like this. Okay, now watch this carefully. Rocks are not that hard to paint if you pay attention to the technique that we use, because it's all in technique. That's all it is. Now see, there's a mumble-jumbled mess of darkness there. All you do is come in here like this, build some highlights, like so. Make a nice big rock there, and up here you have one. They all have a little different shape or a different size. Some of them even have a little different coloring. Okay, now as you come across, you continue. Now be careful not to get too many rocks that are, exactly the same, because it's real monotonous if you're not careful. Small one or two there. Over here we have one. Here. A little bit of white, a little bit of yellow. Now up here I'm going to have a fairly large one, but I wanted to share with you something that's kind of neat. You can take an area like that where you have a large rock, put on a highlight, and you can always come back if you want to later. In fact, let's just do it now. Rinse your brush out, and you can take a little bit of the dark color, a little brown, a little blue, a little purple, on any of these rocks you want to. You can come back in and add a little darkness. You can put some little cracks in there. Just like so. Okay. You can always then come back with a little bit of sunshine. Add a highlight or two, add some little cracks and crevices, just make it interesting. Have some fun with it. See, that's a nice sloped sort of a slab. You got these are a little rounded. You can come back and add darks and lights. In fact, you can add a little bit of this light blue, violet, and purple on the back side of these rocks to kind of form the other side, and then you can take your finger and kind of soften it. So that forms the back side. Now you don't want to highlight. That's not called like the sunlit highlight. That's called a reflected highlight. That's called backlighting. Just a little bit of light on the back to form the back side of each rock. Okay, that's sort of a trick of the trade, and it's very important if you're doing much work where you have a lot of darkness and you can't see the other side. Same thing with a tree. We'll probably put a little bit of that light on the back side of the tree. Okay, now after you've blocked in most of your rocks, It's going to be important at this point now for us to begin developing some of the minor and some of the intermediate details. One thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to put some grass in here and reflect it into the water, and then we're going to go up and put our limbs on our tree and start the bark and start detailing things a little bit. Now take your number 6 bristle brush and let's go down here to some green, Hooker's green with a little purple, and again a touch of brown. And let's start over here in the corner. Now I'm going to turn my brush sideways and I'm just going to fuzz up here. You can just kind of blob on. Now fuzz up the color. Like so. Turn your brush sideways. You can get some of the bigger weeds coming up like so. Kind of taper it as you go across. Now, up here around the edge of the water in a couple of spots, we'll put a little piece of grass or two. Do the same thing. You turn your brush sideways. You create just a little bit of a smudge, and then you reflect it immediately down into the water. So you just go up and down. That creates a nice reflection, and already your painting is beginning to develop into a little bit more finished, a little more exciting painting. Now you can build grasses a lot of places. Just be sure that wherever you put the grass that you kind of reflect it back down into the water, okay? Now, so we've got our grasses down here, our grasses right here. Now it's time to go up here and put some of the small tree limbs on to give this painting a lot of character. So rinse your brush out. We're going to switch to our script brush now. I want you to notice down here on our palette that it's drying up some. So once again, well, you can spray the whole thing and scrape it all off, or just scrape off a section where you want to work, and that's what I'm going to do. Just find me a little spot here, save us a little time. Take your script brush, get plenty of water, take your blue and your brown, and let's get the nice soupy mixture. Now this, what I'm going to do is get you started on this. I probably won't finish this painting till later, so because it will just take too long, but I'm going to get all the basic ones on there, then you can finish it up to suit your own particular needs. But you take each limb that you started and you start back in and you finish it like this. Now this is strictly an instructional thing. Keep in mind that yes, a lot of these trees probably need to have leaves on them, but I'm not interested in leaves right now. I'm interested in you learning how to paint tree limbs. We're going to do lots of things where you'll learn to paint leaves later. Now if you'll notice, I keep adding a little water to the mixture to keep it soupy. I roll my brush around till it forms a point. This is really fun. Now up here, we know that the tree's leaning out, but it's going to, part of the limbs are going to come back into the painting. This creates a nice eye flow in the painting, which is a composition problem, and that's covered in some other tapes and some of our TV programs, so you can always pick up some information on composition later. But composition is important that you understand it. Alright, so I'm going to get a lot of limbs. Don't be afraid to overlap. Hold your brush back towards the end. Just barely touch it. Now don't get way up here and hold it like this up close. Hold it way back. Okay. Every tree is different, but this is the basic technique for learning how to paint tree limbs. Now then, now do the same thing over on the other side. Get your limbs coming out. Make sure there's a lot of overlap and a lot of interest in this. Don't be afraid to experiment. Remember, you're in the learning stage. Most of us nowadays, we live in such a fast-paced, push-button world that sometimes we don't want to learn it properly. We don't want to take the time. We want to be good too quick. Well, you don't learn to be a painter in just a lesson or two or by watching a couple of videos. You need to concentrate, work at it, practice it. Do it over and over and over until you feel good about what you're doing. I can only do so much as an instructor, and that's show you the basics and apply how to apply basic principles. The rest is up to you. Okay. And notice we're making a variety of shapes and sizes of limbs with this script brush. It's all in how much pressure you apply and how well you handle it. There's a lot to do with it. It comes with practice. The best thing to do is get a couple of small blank canvases. Okay, now then. You've got a good variety of limbs. You can go back and forth in all different directions. See, you can come back this way. You can do a lot of different things. Okay, now we're making progress here. Okay, you may want to spread out and do a lot more with that than what I'm doing. You can add a few more limbs, you can add a few other things here and there. We're going to add a couple at the bottom. But right quick, I want to show you another thing to do with this script brush, just for learning. You take this same brush, the same mixture, and you add some Hooker's green to it. And get it a little greener or maybe a little purple. I think I got too much green in there. Same soupy mixture, same consistency, just a little different color. Now down here at the bottom of your canvas, you will start putting in the weeds. Now I'm going to show you this a little prematurely, but while I had this in my hand, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to put weeds in. You kind of have to get your motor started, going in a complete circle here, see? And you put these weeds in, going in a circular motion all the way up, across. Like so. Okay, so that's what you do when you're trying to build weeds. Now you can use light ones against dark colors like over here. You can use dark ones against light values. Just depends on where you're putting the weeds. Okay. All right, now you'll go across and put the rest of your weeds. I'm not going to do that just yet because we do have a little more work to do on our water, but you also will put some up here. And wherever you put things, of course, then you can reflect it in the water. Just be real loose and free and quick with it. Just get a little bit of reflection in the water, and every time you add something to the water, it gets wetter and wetter and wetter. Okay. Just have some fun with that, because painting weeds can really get your attention, and if you're not careful, you'll go overboard. You don't want to put too many, but you don't want to put just too few either. Okay. And you can put them in a lot of places. Wherever you've got a little clump coming out, well, add them. Just be sure you get a little bit of reflection in the water. Do everything quickly. See how loose and free? Your painting looks fresher. Okay? Now let's move over and let's put the highlights on this tree, okay? Now the first thing we're going to do is switch brushes to a number 6 bristle brush. And you're going to go down here on your palette, take a little white, a little touch of yellow, and a little touch of red, and you get what I like to call sunshine color. And all this stuff is very thoroughly explained in the little instructional booklet that goes with this painting. At least this can show you the technique how to apply it. The book will be a little more detailed. Now you come up here and you begin applying this highlight. Now that's pretty yellow. Now if you want a redder highlight, you can put a redder highlight, which I'm going to add a little more red to that. But I'm also putting on a little too thick. I'm going to put this on a little lighter. Okay. Now you dry brush this along the edge here, leaving it kind of textured, you might say. Letting some of the dark values come through so that it looks kind of like bark. Little short choppy strokes. Now you can always come back and add brighter highlight if you want to, but right now all you need to do is go in and add these little choppy highlights to get the bark started. Okay. Now you can keep adding color, you can change color, you can do a lot of things just simply by getting a little more white or a little more red, but keep it loose, keep it free, keep it very spontaneous. Now wherever there's a tree where the limb joins on, notice you just put a little circle around it, and that makes it look like it's joined on in the front or the side better, and that's a nice little trick to use. Now you try to put the highlight anywhere there's a major limb. Some places you don't have to highlight, but most of the time if it's a big limb and it will handle a highlight, well, be sure you put it on there, okay? Like that. Now, you want to brighten it up a little bit, go ahead. Just here and there, you can add some brighter highlights to give it a little more three-dimensional form. And just like on the rocks here in just a second, we can add a reflected blue highlight on the back side. That makes the tree look a lot rounder. So immediately you wipe your brush out, take a little light blue violet with a little purple. You can even darken that by adding some ultramarine blue to it. And right on the back side, very faintly, you dry brush that color on the back side, just like this. Now don't get it too strong, and just gently dry brush this little bluish color on the back. Now if you ever look at any of the great masters paintings, or some of the, or even some of the modern contemporary artists, this is a very common technique for creating form and establishing shape a little bit better. Now whether this is actually happening in real life, I don't know, but artistically it works. Now, one thing that I'm going to show you now that we've got a lot of this blocked in here, oh, and by the way, before I forget, you can go back here in the background on any of these places and put these little limbs and then put leaves on them. Let me just quickly show you something. If I wanted to come back here and put a tall tree, you start with a skeleton, see? Put a few skeleton trees back here, and just a little bit, we will put some leaves on those, or you can leave some of them dead. There's just a lot of different things you can do if you want to. Now don't get that too dark. It's kind of a soupy mixture. This adds a lot of interest to the painting, okay? And I'll show you how to put a few leaves on those. You can put some over here, and you can make them different colors. If you want to make a lighter trunk to show up against the dark green tree, see, these can be the skeleton for these trees back here. You just make a little lighter tree trunk that kind of weaves itself in and out of the highlights back there. That's really pretty. And that makes the trees look more finished, okay? Now another thing I'm going to show you here is really important, and we're going to switch to our number 10 bristle brush. This is one of the finalizing things that you do to a painting, and that's some of the little ground cover, the highlights, the flowers, whatever you want to call it. But you take your number 10 brush and you flatten it out down on your palette here. And I don't care what color you use. I think because we have a lot of greens in this painting, I'm going to use the complements of that, which would be some reddish oranges, some reds, maybe some violets. But I'm going to take some red and some yellow. Start off with that. Mix it in real good. And start up here now on the little hill where the tree is. Now I'm going to push on the canvas a little bit because I don't want it to bounce. And I'm going to use the same technique that I used on doing the leaves on the trees, and I'm going to create this sort of a ground cover. It's a highlight that establishes the ground as it's in bloom, whether it be little flowers or, you know, lots of things bloom. Even weeds bloom out. Some weeds are very beautiful. But this creates a nice soft color, a little highlight. Now this is a technique that takes a lot of practice, getting the right amount of paint and the right amount of water and getting this on here so that it's not just a definite pattern, but you can put it all through here. Then you can take some pure red if you want to and mix a little red with it. Go around the bottom of the tree trunk. You can put a little bit around the rocks. You can add a little bit in the background here and there, just barely touch it, because anywhere you start a color like that, you need to repeat it somewhere in the painting. But around the rocks in certain places, maybe over here on some of the clumps of grass, you want these little soft highlights of color, contrast, and complement the painting. Now, on the other hand, you take that same brush, and you take a little green and a little yellow, and you might want to drag up some grasses. See that contrast like this. Now the sunlight's coming right here, so you obviously have a little more light there. You may want to have some of this grass here and there around some of the rocks, between them, under them, that come up below them. Back here on the background, just pushing up, creating a little bit more of a grass-like effect. Now, remember, whatever you put above the water, you need to put in the water. So the next step is to put the final reflections into the water. And the first thing we're going to do, well, let's switch to our number 6 bristle brush. And you take a little blue and brown with a touch of purple. And that tree right there will reflect right over here. And the way you do this is you turn your brush sideways. You want to be sure you don't get the paint just so heavy and thick and so dark that it becomes a problem. So you might want to throw a little bit of white in with it, just a little bit. Turn your brush sideways. And you go like this, back and forth. And don't make it a solid color, okay? But that's how you get the beginning of the reflection of that trunk in there. And then all along the shoreline, you go along and you put some little dark smudges like this to sort of suggest the reflection of the rocks, okay? And then after that, so you just kind of smudge this along here. Then you take a little bit of sunshine color, like we used on our rocks up here on the tree, which was white, little touch of yellow and red, and some of the mud that's on your brush, and you reflect this back and forth very quickly and very carefully on the edges, and you smudge like this. Reflections are only a suggestion. That's how they are. Your mind does the rest, okay? In fact, painting in itself is nothing but a suggestion of detail. Then I added a little more white to this, okay, just a little more white, and I dry brush along the edge here and out into the water. This little bit of a reflective quality, this is called glazing. It takes a little bit of experience because when you put it on, if you're not careful, it'll be way too white. But you just dry brush gently across some of the areas that need to be softened. That creates a little bit of a glossy effect without distorting the image too much. Okay? Now, as soon as you've got that basically done and you've got some of the highlights and some trees, you can go back and start adding anything you want to add to make this thing have character. For instance, you may want to come back and leaf in some trees right here very quickly, very loosely, very free. Just a different color. In fact, you could even make this late summer, early fall and get just a little bit of a rust color back here. Don't be afraid. That's what painting is all about. Take a little red, a little yellow, just very quickly highlight back in here, adding some different values to the painting. Well, I think that's all I'm going to show you on this painting today. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I have enjoyed it, and I hope you can join us again on the Inspiration of Painting. Stay inspired and keep painting.